At the end of Season 1, I was left disappointed, yet still hopeful for the second year's story, as I had an overall positive impression of the narrative, despite its flaws. Individual characters and their arcs were well done and interesting, and this even extended to the character factions and inter-character relationships. The big issue with Season 1 related more to general issues such as poor villains, inconsistent themes, and overall lack of oomph I found in the story of other Hoyo games. The game has strong characters that can carry the story, as long as they iron out the kinks. Season 2 had the potential to be truly great, so how did they do over the past year? Season 2 was bad, and it was bad in the most frustrating way possible. Season 2 was bad because, much like in Season 1, there were so many great moments for individuals, yet somehow the general storytelling and even format of the season was way worse. The things I liked from the past year, not including the epilogue, include Alice and Izuha's entire relationship and story arc, Izolde in general, as she served as an actually interesting villain, with an interesting and somewhat sympathetic reason for her actions, Seed's agent story genuinely tore into my heartstrings, and Shiyuan's crash out at the end of the arc being completely justified, yet still shows a character flaw as he ignores the feelings of the person he's mad for. There's more great bits of fiction in the story, but the point is that Season 2 isn't without merit. The issue is that due to the structure of the story, issues arise that greatly outshine all the positives. The best way to show why the story structure is bad is to explain how it impacts the positive moments from Season 1. I like Alice and Izuha's dynamic, yet they feel very disconnected from the other members of Spook Shack, as they barely interact with Idhari and Lucia, which isn't helped by the fact that the second half of Spook Shack had an entire patch between introductions. Seed and Izolde were interesting characters, yet Oboe Squad somehow has too little screen time, but somehow their placement in the story is why Spook Shack feels so disorganized. This further extends to the fact that Spook Shack and Oboe Squad's inclusion also gets in the way of the narrative for Suibian Temple, which in and of itself introduces 3 characters. One of them dips out of the story for a few months, keeps the other 2, yet only has them appear occasionally, and doesn't give them any good character moments as we are focused on the other groups, only for the story to shift its focus onto another member of the group near the end of the season. As a result, 2 characters are basically wasted in the plot. One character didn't get enough build-up, and only one of them I find to be truly interesting, yet he was barely in the story in the first place. By having this weird structure of going from one faction to another, back to one we've seen before, but with new characters, there really isn't time for things to settle. Yes, Season 1 went from faction to faction, but most factions introduced all its characters at once, and if they appeared in the story later, it's a continuation of the characters we already know and love. And if a faction is reintroduced to the game, either their arc is a minor one, or a character in it gets a standalone agent story that doesn't get in the way of the main narrative. Also, in general, faction arcs used to be 1 to 2 patches long, and the main conflict resolves within that arc. Hell, in 1.0, they were able to complete 3 story arcs in pretty satisfying ways. Individual characters and arcs are nice, but the factions of ZZZ are really what made these individuals shine. In Season 1, there was a general found family feel between the groups. Each member of a faction interacted with the others in a unique way, and it made the world feel very alive. Even characters without a lot of screen time can become fan favorites, as one can imagine pretty much everything about them from how they operate with their faction members. This goes for many A ranks such as Sokaku and Piper. Compare this to Season 2, in where Suibian Temple has a member that is introduced separately from everyone else, Spook Shack, which only starts with half of its members, who don't even talk to each other, and Oboe Squad, in which Soldier 11 and Trigger don't play integral roles, as they need to give their screen time to the 2 new members of the group. I actually like Krampus, but even their presence is a problem, as it contributes to the lack of attention that the main group of the story gets. And when the factions are done poorly, it becomes harder to care about the characters within them, Because she only really showed up at the end, I genuinely didn't feel that invested in Ye Xinguang's plot about the fact that using her sword makes her lose her memories. And because she didn't have enough screen time to get the audience to truly know her, it becomes way harder to try to justify how poorly her arc was handled. The things surrounding it was interesting, like the fact that she was forced into the position by being tricked, yet due to her own resolve and willpower, she's willing to become a hero regardless of the fact. Yet, because when she does lose all her senses and she gets it back immediately, followed by her synergizing with the sword and making the side effects basically non-existent, I can't help but feel like there truly were no stakes or weight in the situation to begin with. And all they had to do was just structure it a little differently. They could have had Xinguang more present in the story. They could have had her gradually lose her memories, maybe have a cliffhanger when she loses her senses, and then have her earn that sword synergy. The story could have been way more compelling that way. But because we fit a ton of content that could have been considered filler in the middle, they tried to shove all of that into 2 patches. Even though I found Season 2 to be awful, the epilogue gives me some hope for the future. The Angels of Delusion are a great faction. All the members are introduced at once and have an interesting dynamic with each other, which is seen in the first cutscene of them alone, with a complete story arc at the gate. The patch after introduces a truly menacing villain, and even though they are a one-off, this one truly sent a chill down my spine, and I can say I'm very happy with their inclusion. The patch also introduces a mysterious new character and a potentially great new group dynamic of Billy, Belle, and Ciccia. While I found the final epilogue patch mid, the setup for Season 3 was actually pretty great, and I'm glad they're spending the epilogue to properly introduce the key players of the next story arc. While I won't hold my breath, ZZZ still hasn't thrown away all of its goodwill. I don't expect anything, but I truly hope Season 3 is where ZZZ will actually start to shine. And with that, happy 2nd anniversary ZZZ. I hope to see better.